I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
From the gates of Mount Rome to the far corners of the endless highway, wherever you are, welcome to the show.
So you believe in some kind of Armageddon?
Yeah, most definitely. We in the last times and days right now. The Illuminati's in effect.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Unfiltered Rise with me, Heidi Luv. And today I have a reoccurring guest and friend, Tim Constantine from the Sixth Sensory Podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, riding hot on the heels of that last episode.
Woo,
I think I told
right?
you I got some emails. People were really excited about that, so it's good to get back in here and talk with you again.
Well, and funny enough, me and Tim must be like, we are like, we've got some connection brain-wise, because he was just talking to me in the pre-show and I'm like, I am literally studying this. So, and it's a random, it's not like an everyday thing. And again, just like Martinism, we're just headed down the road where we're led, and here we are. So we're going to get into some fun stuff today.
Yeah, and your conspiracy research, I've noticed lately, has been just on fire. Originally, we were talking about doing something on like alchemy, occultism, and I think the Melchizedek order. But
yeah.
I feel like, and I think it worked out. I think it just kind of did this on its own. It's like where it worked out for us to skip that this time and do something more aligned with like what you're currently working on. And I think I found some really good stuff that ties in with Howard Hughes, that whole presentation that you did, which is great. JFK, Theosophy, all that stuff.
Well, it's super weird because I ran down, like, I never go after just one thing. I'm usually chasing Mormons. Like, I mean, but Howard Hughes is so fascinating. I mean, I just couldn't let that episode go at where it was. And I'm really like studying. I've gone through about 3 books now about the CIA and undercover stuff. And this is what led me to Bobby Kennedy's assassination, where the Mormon mafia was definitely in there. But then I'm talking to you about it just offhand, and you're like, "Whoa, I'm looking at this too." So, yeah, I'm excited for today.
Yeah, I've got stuff on the JFK assassination, and it sounds like you've got stuff on Bobby.
Yes. Yep. Bobby and MK Ultra, and a little bit about JFK, but I'm focusing more on Bobby just because the Mormon mafia was super involved in it.
Yeah.
So
We should just
awesome.
compare notes. It'll be fun.
Awesome. Let's do it. I know I don't have any yet, but I'm going to go off memory today.
Okay.
'cause
Well, yeah.
We're
you know what I
unscripted.
mean. Yeah. Yeah.
Usually I'm
absolutely.
all like, I had a whole bunch of pages, but this is such a fascinating thing that I think I'll be able to remember most of it. So,
Yeah. And
cool.
like even Oswald fits into this for me too. And a lot of this started for me a couple weeks ago. People kept asking me to do a New Jersey drones episode. So as I was looking into that, I found some stuff that pertains to this as well, believe it or not. It always just
Wow.
goes back later, you know?
Oh yeah. It just seems like at the end of every trail, like it's a cult.
Yeah.
There's some occult connection, and it shouldn't be there. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense when we're talking about, presidents and CIA and this and that, and guys that are supposed to be like super uber Catholic and oh blah blah blah, and it just is strange, right? Like we're
Yeah.
talking about things that are creeping in that are old, that have been forgotten. Honestly,
Yeah.
they've been forgotten.
Yeah. It goes back to forgotten things from earlier, and in like the soup of this nation, and like just the timeline we're on and all that, and like JFK, like that assassination, and even Watergate, because, and this is what I found, even the best JFK assassination documentaries might leave people confused about who or why that happened. But what I keep seeing is that it's pretty much clear that the CIA probably had a hand in it, but also, and I think it's very possible the reason we haven't been able to crack that case is because no one has looked into the involvement of NASA, aerospace, and Howard Hughes himself.
Yes, Howard Hughes is fascinating, and his obsessive compulsive disorder really plays into this. But not only that, how he was raised, because I firmly believe that his mother had Munchausen by proxy from what I've been researching anyways. And so that's where he got the obsessive compulsion on his health and all the things, because she had him really spazzed out. So
Yeah.
yeah, weird.
Well, he's an interesting character, and I hadn't heard anybody previous to you do a deep dive on him. But I'll tell you how I think he fits into this, and I'd like to maybe hear how you like color in the gaps in this. But like, there's just, so we know, we talked about this in a pre-roll. There's this CIA block on the release of the JFK files. Still, the CIA, even right after the murder, they start trying to disturb and derail the Garrison investigation.
Mhm.
And Garrison, in interviews, said that he had narrowed down and isolated the suspects of the murder to individuals within the aerospace military industrial complex. And at the time, that was Hughes, Lockheed, and Boeing. And we know Boeing, we know how they do. We'll just say this, that their whistleblowers just turn up. We know how they turn up, right? So,
Oh yeah.
and apparently Garrison and this information hasn't been released and is still redacted. It hasn't completely been released. Like Trump put some of it out, but not all the stuff pertaining to aerospace.
Well, and I think that Trump is going to block some of this because of Roy Cohn, right?
He is that judge Napolitano from New Jersey. He said Trump told him if you saw what was in those files, you would not release them either. So it seems
Mhm.
like there's something big in there, and I think it's aerospace and Hughes possibly, because Hughes was a part of that world.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're, and I think the problem is when you get to Roy Cohn, he connects to the mob, which connects to Permindex, and the board of Permindex is very interesting. We're talking about mobsters, we're talking about fascists, we're talking about some crazy stuff. And so I was like, why would he even, obviously Trump doesn't want this released, because honestly, it will implicate him, because Roy Cohn was his fixer for so many years. It's not
Yeah.
going to happen. Yeah.
And I'm going to add one more element into this. I'm curious if it comes up on your end as well, but surprise, surprise, the Nazis might also be involved with specifically the JFK assassination. And I'm talking about the post-war paperclip Nazis. So, because there's a case to be made that von Braun and the aerospace companies contracted to kill on JFK because they didn't want him talking with the Russians about space race stuff. Because Kennedy
Mhm.
wanted to do a joint mission to space with the Russians. Von Braun and the paperclip Nazis didn't like that. They did not like JFK's policy on NASA and big aerospace in general. And Oswald, you mentioned him earlier, maybe it was in the pre-roll, but he was telling people before the assassination that he was going to work at NASA. So
Yep.
we're it just keeps pointing back to aerospace here.
Well, and he was going to go work for NASA right before. So he had this bad history of supposedly being like a loser that couldn't keep a job. But then all of a sudden, he went from working at a coffee shop to going to go work at NASA. This was the
Mhm.
story. And then that didn't happen because of everything that happened to him. But he doesn't remember any of this whole situation. And he said, that the literal comment I think that probably got him killed was, he said, oh no, if that's true, then I'm the patsy. That was like one
Yeah.
of his last things he said. And I'm like, oh man, that would suck too to know you're the one. Like,
So
can you
does the
imagine?
permadex thing fit in with Nazis at all?
Yeah, a little bit. So the Permindex, I was just going through my screenshots, and this whole thing, this Permindex Corporation and the financiers of it and the board of it is bananas. Like when you look at the board, and I'm found it right here. This is on the initial board in 1958, according to the EIR's examination and corporation papers in Switzerland. This is what it says. Sorry, I gotta plug this in. Um, cut this part out. But my headphones are being crazy. Of course they are.
Are you losing power?
No, well, yeah, actually. Yeah, this one died. Okay, so it is the following. So start that again. On the board of Permindex is Louise Mortimer Bloomfield. Okay, so we all know who that is. Fernek Nagy, former Prime Minister of Hungary, Giorgio Montello, Roy Cohn, right-hand man of Joseph McCarthy and of President Trump, Joseph Bonanno, mafia, yeah, Jean de Menil, and then Paul Rigodorsky, Count Gutierrez di Spaffadora from the Mussolini bureaucracy. Why are we associating with fascists? Like, this is
Wow,
not
that's
good.
strange.
Yeah. So Hans Segelman, banker in Basel, Carlo de Amelio, attorney in Rome. Guess who he was the attorney for? The House of Savoy.
Okay.
And then we get to Max Hageman, Munir Koribagi in Egypt, Farouk's uncle, Giuseppe Zagotti, Italian fascist, and Frank H. Simonfay, Hungary. And guess who's my favorite one? Clay Shaw.
Okay. Interesting. So,
So Clay's connected to everything.
what is this company? What do they do? What do they do predominantly?
Well, what they were made to look like they did was own a company, right? But they really didn't. This Permindex actually, okay, their headquarters is in Montreal in Switzerland. And supposedly it was to encourage trade between the nations in the Western world, but their
Wow.
actual purpose was to fund assassinations.
Yeah.
This is like an assassination company. And
Yeah.
so they almost killed the French president like four times. And then like we've got JFK involved in it. He was 100% involved on that. He was one of their marks. So was Bobby. All these things. And I'm just like, this is crazy because it goes into, and this is of course where I got into it was because Swiss banks for Vegas. Okay, so back to Hughes once again were involved in this, and petroleum interests and their backers. So this says to fund and direct assassinations of European, Mideast, and world leaders considered to be threats to the Western world, and to petroleum interests and their backer. That's the real. That's the
Mm-hmm.
real. And then the second part, provide couriers, agents of transportation, and depositing funds through Swiss Bank for Vegas, Miami, and the International Gambling Syndicate, which is why we've got the mob in there. And then number three, coordinate the espionage activities of white Russian soldiers and the Division 5 of the FBI, headed by William Sullivan. And then we've got number four is build and operate hotels and gambling casinos. So it goes always right back to where I'm studying, which is, you know, the Mormon mob, Howard Hughes, all that stuff. There's a lot, books, papers, articles of Permindex, but everything's been forgotten. Everything.
Well,
Nobody talks about this. Yeah.
no, that's why I wanted clarification because I don't know a whole lot about it. But like, it sounds like to me, here's the question: what if people over here in our CIA and our State Department were outsourcing assassination gigs
Oh, they
through a
were.
place like this? Because Kennedy, when it comes to Kennedy, he went around the backs of the State Department and the
Yep.
CIA to try
Yep.
and like coordinate this cooperative space endeavor with the Russians, and
Yes.
nobody wanted that. And like,
Well, and all of these guys, this goes to Halliburton. This goes to Halliburton. Like this goes all the way up the chain. And I'll tell you what, the one thing that I was looking for that I ran into NASA on exactly where you're going with this. I was trying to find out who was brought over on Project Paperclip that were Mormon because I wanted to know how many
Mm.
Mormons they smuggled out of Germany under that, you know. And I
Yeah.
talked to this other researcher that does a ton on Mormonism, and he's like, you'll never find it. I have looked everywhere. And he's the one that helps me a lot of times with my CIA stuff because he knows how to like filter through that really well. He's like, I've been there, done that. It's not happening. You won't find it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm, I know I keep sprinkling in this aerospace thing, but it's because
Oh, it's
it's,
there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I know Hughes is involved with it and everything like that. But there was a guy named Sergei Khrushchev. His dad was the famous Khrushchev.
Mhm.
He has said later that JFK and his dad were embarking on this Russian American
Mm.
joint moon mission. Of course, they were planning it right up to the assassination. And a move like that, from what I'm finding, would have really threatened aerospace and NASA and the paperclip Nazis and their funding. And it would have ended the
Yes.
Cold War. And we know that the military industrial complex makes billions on war, even if it's cold. They did not want that. Aerospace companies, NASA, they didn't want it into the Cold War, but also the paperclip Nazis hate Russians because it is a
Yes.
continuation of that World War II feud. So,
Well, not just that. They didn't want, okay, so if we were to go off the petrodollar and be
mhm,
backed by actual gold, then Russia's going to own our ass. And that's part of the other reason why they don't want anything to do with that. And that's why Putin won't give up now because
yeah.
they all go to the WEF together. They all do all the things. But, you know, he just doesn't want to lose what he has because he's got backing, real backing, not petrol backing, right? But guess who were the main financiers of Permindex? They're all oil companies.
Yeah.
US oil companies. And so
And
no
that's why they go
wonder.
after him,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
isn't that part of why they go after Putin? And I'm not pro Putin, but it's because he's not part of the club.
He's not part of their club because
He's
he
yes.
likes gold back, right?
That's what
He
I'm
wants to
saying.
have gold backs. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. He's always standing over there in the corner by himself. And it's like you think about all the people who we've went after because they did not adopt our dollar. It's guys like Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi,
Yes.
and
Yep.
and
Well,
we
this
take
goes to
those kind of people
Zapata
out.
oil. You know, this goes to Zapata oil, which Zapata oil and the Bay of Pigs. It goes back into that. But Zapata oil, you have to understand, that was the one that Bush owned Zapata oil and leased the islands from Howard Hughes for this
Yeah.
whole,
So we're back at
assassination on Cuba.
CIA.
Yes,
It's CIA because
absolutely.
Bush was
Yep.
head of the CIA. Wow, that's
Well, and
crazy.
it literally says Dick Cheney trying to be vice president of the United States, the Bush researchers of the JFK assassination, and family links to Halliburton, Root, and Brown, and Permidex have all been involved since 1963 to determine if George H.W. Bush had any intelligence role in November 1983. Efforts conclusively prove that he was a CIA agent at that time, and that has been futile. They can't nail it down. So they can't get that nailed down. And then they said this was directly involved with Cuban exiles, which we know because Zapata Oil was with Hughes in that area. They were there to get Castro. That was that whole thing what was about. And so it says despite the close proximity of this to Cuba and the naming of boats for the Bay of Pigs invasion, notably the Barbara. However, the financial and corporate structures which have financed George H.W. Bush have not been proven. So we're back to like, okay, you've got all these names, you've got all this stuff, you've got all these, we've got like everything in this box, but there's nothing that we can definitively nail in the coffin, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
It's
but
annoying.
but military industrial complex, aerospace, and of course, and the CIA just doing shady stuff in the background seems to be
Hmm.
a big part of the pie here. And I have a whole thing on Eisenhower. He was corrupt. He was running coups and South. He was doing this kind of stuff that you just mentioned, just
Yes.
starting
All
little
all
mini
of it.
wars outside of the borders of the country. He was running his own deep state mafia with the Dulles brothers and Ed Bernays.
Yes.
Eisenhower, he unleashed this historical wave of propaganda over the American people. But what has bothered me for years is that speech he did on his way out of office, because I was thinking, like, why does this corrupt gangster president warn the American people about the military industrial complex? And I think
Mhm.
just like in the last couple of weeks, I finally figured this out. I think the paperclip Nazis embedded and infiltrated the aerospace business, aka the military industrial complex, with von Braun at the helm. And I think Eisenhower was warning about this foreign incel group of Nazis.
Well, and plus we've got the Berman brothers, right? Like that's a no, whole nother like that or Brofman. I think I don't know how to say their name right. It's a weird spelling, but I think it's Brofman. But anyway, they're part of this just alongside of it. It's all about money,
Yeah.
power, and it all goes into like things that shouldn't connect, right? Like I think that's why JFK said he was going to blow the CIA to all the corners of the earth. It freaking got him killed. That speech got him killed. He said, I will destroy the CIA and blow it to the four corners of the earth. Like he knew it was corrupt. He knew they were playing games. He knew this was all like getting out of hand. But as soon as he's out of the way, right? Like what happens? And even your boy Oswald, he said, you will never see me again, to this one press guy that came in and did like press speech, whatever for him. He said, now that the next president is taking over, when, you know, when the next one stepped in, he said, a whole new regime is taking over. You don't understand what's going on and you'll never see me again. He knew he was going to die. He knew.
Yeah.
He knew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, you're right on the money with JFK. I mean, look, the thing about JFK is this, and this is why this is such an open mystery today, is because when you look into it, you realize how many people he really did piss off. And it's
Oh,
a very
yeah.
lengthy list. But at the top of that list, like you're saying, is the CIA. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so whoever had him killed were working with the CIA. I think that's really what this
Clay
comes down
Shaw
to.
is huge on this. Clay Shaw comes up over probably more than anyone else. That
Hmm.
Clay Shaw comes up. And you know, I just think that, you know, Kennedy was known to that he screwed over the mob. Like he was supposed to help them after he got in because, you know, they helped him get in. And then he didn't and kind of screwed him over. And so he screws over the mob. He's screwing over like oil stuff. He doesn't give a crap anymore. They couldn't control him.
Hmm.
He was going rogue.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
You know, it's crazy. And just to tie it up, I think too that what we're kind of cooking with here, we've got to just throw the Nazis in that pot too,
oh,
the
they're
paperclip
in there.
Nazis, because
Mm-hmm.
I think that Kennedy and his reform and his space and his joint venture with the Russians, it was directly threatening to these paperclip Nazis. But I've been listening to this dark journalist guy some lately. He's got some really good stuff. Like some of my research, like I just have been tacking on to some of the stuff I've heard him say. And he was telling this story about this guy that he knows from, he's in his 80s today, but his name's like Douglas Caddy. And he was a
Mm.
Watergate lawyer who was best
Oh.
friends with a guy named E. Howard Hunt. Hunt is this top spy. He's one of our biggest spies during the Kennedy years. He was one of the guys also caught in that Watergate mess. He was
Yep.
in the break-in. Otherwise, like history would have forgotten Hunt altogether. But Hunt and Douglas Caddy, before Hunt goes to prison for Watergate, that he has this talk with his friend. It's kind of like, Doug, take care of my family. I'm about to disappear, that whole thing. And
Mm-hmm.
on his way out the door, Douglas Caddy goes, oh, by the way, all those years ago, what did you find out as a spy during the JFK assassination? Why did they kill him? And Hunt says that he was going to give away the biggest national security secret to the Russians.
Oh, wow.
So I thought that was a weird spin on this. And
Hmm.
and I think the story goes is that Douglas said, okay, what was the secret? And this top spy says he was going to give them everything we have on space, technology, and maybe even UFOs. So that
Wow.
not
Oh
to
my
throw
gosh.
UFOs in here and
No,
just
it's
blow
true.
the door.
It's true. Well, and actually, some weird stuff is the Mormons go right along. I
Yeah.
haven't mentioned this yet, But Nixon, right along with all of the Watergate scandal, all of this stuff, not only the Mormon mafia, but senators. Bob Bennett, he is a senator that keeps coming up. He's a Mormon. He's a big deal in the Mormons. And literally Orrin Hatch that follows him ends up like basically giving him praise, like his exit from Congress or Senate, I can't remember which, but he was talking about it and he was like, oh yeah, he's just so great, he's so great. Like it was very weird and scripted. He just kept saying the same thing over and over. It was not heartfelt but meant to be, but you can see the connections right all the way up. Like it never stopped. It
Yeah.
never stopped. No.
So yeah, I mean, if all this stuff, I think for my research, who it threatens the most is aerospace, and of course the
Yes,
paperclip Nazis and that whole agenda. But if the Mormons and the Catholic Church were helping the Nazis get over here in the first place,
they were.
if the
Yep.
the Mormons were a part of Operation Paperclip in the first place, then yeah, that puts me at the scene. That puts them at the scene of the crime for me for
Well,
this.
so the number one thing is for the Mormon church, you have to understand the prophets of the church at that time were very good friends with the presidents of the United States at that time. And also, they were one of the only people that sent aid to Germany. The Mormon church sent aid to Germany to help the Nazis, basically. Like they say they didn't, but they did. And so they were like, oh, we were doing it to help our newly converted people. Okay, if you're newly converted, that means you probably did that because you want to eat today. I mean,
Mm,
things were probably pretty bad. And also, if you're working together, see, here's the thing. Everybody always says, well, Mormons hate Catholics and Catholics hate Mormons. True enough, but here's the thing. They all belong to the Rotary Club, all of them. Rotary Club International is a huge part of this. And that is where the connections lie, and Masonry, because they connect on a different level. Just like nowadays, where you'll see the prophet of the church shaking hands and doing secret handshakes, that's actually secret society handshakes, not even Freemasonic, secret society handshakes. And why was Utah one of the only places that Yale came and set up a chapter for Skull and Bones? It doesn't make any sense. Who gives one shit about a bunch of weirdo Mormons with 20 wives each out in the middle of nowhere? No, this was planned. This was planned. And they were businessmen. It was on purpose because the first thing the Mormon prophet did once he got here and he was running for his life was call up the president and say, "You want me to help you build your railroad?" Why? Why would that happen?
yeah.
That doesn't make any damn sense. Yeah.
Well, I know, especially once you get out west, the Mormons were very much a part of building that
Yep.
infrastructure, right?
Promontory Point is here. Yes,
Yeah.
this Promontory Point for the finish of the railroad is here where I live near. And so they actually had them do it for free. That's the whole reason, because the prophet has to give the order and then people will give their labor for free. So they got it
S-
done for free.
were the Mormons gaining converts as people were sort of going across to the west for the gold rush and all that when people were migrating?
Well, yeah, for sure. But the bigger part is in Germany, right? They're sending missionaries. And
Uh,
yeah, uh-huh.
yeah. In Germany, when?
During the war. And
Really?
here's the funny thing is there are photos, like I did a whole Nazi show on this about Nazis and Mormonism, is because Heber J. Grant actually went there and had a big Nazi flag behind him at a dinner. And they're like, oh, that was probably just there because they rented the hall or whatever. And I'm like, I don't think so, because
Who was that? Is he a
Heber J.
big?
Grant, the prophet
Yeah.
of the church, president of
Oh,
the church at the time. And so he was saying, oh, yeah, we have to live by the law of the land. This is one of the articles of faith for the Mormons, is to live by the law of the land. So they were doing the Nazi salute. They helped in the Nazis Olympics. The missionaries helped the basketball team. There's like friggin' journals and all kinds of stuff. And I'm going to be releasing a show this week with Beverly Bruff Campbell. Her journal is from Justin Riggs, all his research from ldsabuse.com. And I'm telling you guys, like he hit the nail on the head. It's like the third part of me going down this weird rabbit hole, and he just happened to have that same stuff, and it leads into it because he's talking about, oh, well, if there's a catastrophe, we use the catastrophe to get our feet in the door. We give them a small check for like $20,000. And then we turn around and say, oh, you need your infrastructure fixed. Oh, we have a guy that builds buildings. Oh, we have a guy that has food, and manufactures food stuff. We have a guy, and they bring all these people over, and it's just a different kind of mob. That's all it
Yeah.
is. Mm-hmm.
Well, I know in Moonchild, Crowley talks about his affinity for Joseph Smith and
Oh, for sure.
how much he appreciated the structure of that religion. So if Crowley appreciates it, I wonder what the Nazis saw in it.
Well, because you have to remember too, at that time, two things. Number one, Joseph Smith believed he is in the bloodline of Jesus Christ himself. He believed that Jesus Christ married and had children, much like with Mary Magdalene, much like the book and the movie with Tom Hanks, Holy Grail, whatever. And
Mhm.
so that whole thing, they believe that there's a whole thing. There is a bunch of FLDS, so like the people that still do polygamy here in Salt Lake City, in this area, like more than just in Utah. And that clan actually continues to only breed with each other incestuously to keep their bloodlines pure. Literally. It's the Kingston clan. I haven't done one on them yet, but I will be doing it. And I'll tell you guys, it goes clear up. They're very extremely wealthy, all these things that shouldn't really. And the government kind of just goes, nah. Well, you can't be having people, have babies with their uncles and their aunts and their cousins first and have sisters and brothers. It's messing up the genetics of a whole bunch of things. And babies are missing, right? Like,
Mhm.
because if they don't come out perfect, they disappear. And so now there's this whole thing that's getting exposed with the Kingstons, but it goes up to the top of the government. Once again, there's one guy that's doing a big expose on it right now, and it's on Hulu. I can't remember the name of it. It's like a 10-part miniseries. And he's talking to the guy that is over that whole thing right now. He's like, why didn't you deliver the warrants? And he's like, oh, well, we didn't want to rip kids away from their moms. And he just let the warrants expire. They just let them do whatever the hell they want because they back politicians. And so this still is happening. This is
Yeah.
still happening. Yeah.
And I guess so the Mormons were also involved with Hughes, it sounds like.
Oh, oh yeah.
Uh,
The Mormons, well, the Mormon mafia. Well, the guy that flew him out of Las Vegas was a Mormon, and then they took him to the Bahamas or wherever they took it. That place where he went was Mormons. Mormon controlled. All of his top advisors were Mormons. Mayhew wasn't a Mormon, but Gay was a Mormon. Which if you look him up, he's a part of. He's the one that actually ended up over all of the hospital and all his money and his funds and all this stuff. And so when you look at all these people that he knows and surrounds himself with, they're all Mormon. They're all
mhm.
of them. And so E. Perry Thomas, Robert Gay, he went by Bill Gay, and it continues clear through to now. The stupid show, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Some of those women in that show are related to the gays, and
Okay.
and so it continues. Like they pick and choose who gets to be famous. They pick and choose who gets the contracts. Like it's all the same thing, different day.
Yeah. Well, his aerospace company and
Right.
just connection is what's very interesting to me because I think a lot of what's happening right now, even with this New Jersey drones thing, I think
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing a peek behind the curtain of something that's possibly aerospace, like something that they've been working on for a long time. I think that we're seeing, even in the UFO world, I don't think it's all just extraterrestrial stuff. I think we're seeing
Mm-hmm.
flying machines that are part of this rogue aerospace company with like military back channels. And I think
Right.
Hughes was a big part of that. And I think he was involved too with this like secret aerospace club that went back to the 1800s. Because I found an article in the Library of Congress about Hughes speaking at a press club in 1938, and he's in front of government officials and like representatives of foreign governments and all these powerful, important people. And Hughes says he envisioned a future in aviation when giant flying boats, almost as large as modern ocean liners, will fly the Atlantic under conditions
Hmm.
in which the element of luck, he says, will play no part. So he's describing in detail the type of flying craft and equipment that he believes the future will see.
Well,
So
and why was it really like just a thought, or was it literally? And the spruce goose, that brings to thought the spruce goose,
no,
how they were saying like, oh, that will never fly, that will never fly. Maybe he knew it would, right? Because he's already had the information.
he
Like,
had the
yeah.
information because the tail end of that article, the person who wrote it says, uh, in response to what Hugh said, uh, this is nothing more than an aeronautical engineer's dream. That's how they summed
Mm,
this up. But that's not what he was saying in his speech. He was speaking about it as a reality. Because I think it was a reality because somebody
mm-hmm.
was flying around these boat like airships in the late 1800s. It's called the mystery airship wave. And I think they use that term airship because these things look like these
Yes.
giant boats. Hughes wasn't dreaming. I think he was reflecting on an older era where this tech was developed but faded into obscurity. And it sounds like he was trying to bring it back. And so I looked into this a little bit and I found that there was a guy named Solomon Andrews who displayed a flying machine to Abraham Lincoln and his war cabinet in the 1860s. And then there's all this other evidence from other, like there's this guy named Delshaw who was going to like this thing called the Sonora Air Club and drawing these flying machines in the late 1800s. So
Mm.
there's all these pieces of evidence, and it just got me like curious about his like Hughes and his aerospace connections, because if you go back to that mystery airship wave of the late 1800s, there are just countless newspaper articles on that. But it seems like there were some millionaires in a secret airship club who decided to pull like some Bruce Wayne double life stuff and fly around the country in these strange airships. And if you look, I looked a little bit deeper, and there was this, I found this address in Washington,
Oh.
D.C. There's a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Rich Guy Club in D.C. They have a mansion. It's still there. They had a headquarters there. It's
Hmm.
called the Cosmos Club, and it's
Well, they
still
were
around.
definitely into it because here's the thing. Even I told you, I asked you if you knew about the Seance of the Nine. And the
Yeah.
Seance of the Nine was in this same kind of time frame. It happened in 1953. And in 1953, these people all got together, these nine individuals plus one medium, gathered at an isolated cabin in the woods of Glen Cove, Maine. Okay. Well, that doesn't sound too like big deal, whatever. And they were worshiping gods and Egyptian gods and different things and all this stuff. And so these people like got together and did this. And who cares, right? Big deal. Until you see the list of names on the list and you go, okay, that's a little weird. So Alice Bouvier. That's a very important name. We definitely can recognize. Um, Also, she was born Ava Alice Muriel Astor, descendant of John Jacob Astor and daughter of Colonel John Jacob Astor the sixth or fifth or something, aboard who was aboard the Titanic when it sank, right? She's there. Then and she's also Mrs. Bouvier was no stranger to the workings of the US Intelligence Committee. Okay, she's there. Then we've got Ruth Young, who was known as Ruth Forbes Payne of the Forbes family. Okay. We've got bizarre connections with Arthur and Ruth that they have to the Kennedy assassination
Mm-hmm.
via Michael Payne, Ruth's son from a previous marriage. So, what the hell's going on here? They knew something, they were talking to things. You can't tell me that there wasn't some freaking Stranger Things shit going down. They're seancing to weird Egyptian gods at the same time as they're involved in all this weird stuff, you know? So The nine was a well-known CIA front. By 1963, Michael and Ruth Payne had children together, and guess what? They were the people that were friends of Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey
No
Oswald.
way.
Yes, that's whose car he had at that shooting. He had Ruth's station wagon. And he said,
What?
don't go dragging her into it. And this literally says on February 22nd, 1963, Ruth met Lee Harvey Oswald and his wife, Marina, at a party, which his wife wasn't from here either. She was Russian,
Yeah.
And so that's a whole different
It
thing. But
sounds like
anyway,
some high society
it is. It's this
stuff.
weird, it's like a weird Russian petroleum CIA intelligence ties. And of course, all these people end up like silenced or committing suicide or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
And Peter Levenda wrote about this. Like, this isn't a new thing. Like, I was blown away when I found this. And all I was wondering, I was just researching this stuff about, the Mormons and all that stuff. And then I'm like, why is theosophy involved in here? Why are we having seances in the woods?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this really weird stuff that these people are involved with, that are involved with big deal stuff later, And that just it blew my mind,
The theosophy is tied in with our government from back in the day, back in the early 1900s, and they are involved with that rise of the Nazi government as well, the
Yes.
theosophists. And you do see these little elements
Cybernetics are involved in this.
channeling.
ESP channeling. They had Dr. Purich. I don't know if you've seen him in your studies.
No.
PUH. So that's one. And Dr. Vinod in the Maine woods on New Year's Eve in 1952. This was part of his work with the Round Table Foundation, a research institute including all kinds of subjects like cybernetics and ESP. So
Yeah.
you're not wrong. And it goes all the way over. It gets into Freemasonry. It goes back to the vice president, Henry Wallace. It goes to everybody. Like, this stuff is so weird that it shouldn't connect. Like, when you're playing that game, like, what doesn't fit? Like, this stuff doesn't fit. You know what
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't,
Well,
it's not, it's woo woo. It's not
yep.
CIA declassified stuff, but it is. And Lee Harvey Oswald, they say he was super mentored by this guy, by
Yeah.
the husband of Ruth, and he's involved in all this weird stuff. And so, including hallucinogenic drugs and all kinds of stuff. So, and this happens again with Sirhan Sirhan. His case was so weird. He couldn't even talk right. He would like do weird, repetitive, like, I need the money, 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 money.
Yeah.
Like, he
Yeah.
was like stuck
Like
on weirdo, repetitive.
MK
Yeah.
Ultra mind
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. No, this is the kind of thing that I was seeing in this Cosmos Club too, because I wonder if there's a connection, because
I bet there
JFK
is.
was a member of the Cosmos Club at one
That's
point.
so strange.
It was founded in
Ah,
1878, and I just think it fits in because it's this group of high society people. I do think there's some channeling involved. And because what people were seeing was, when they saw these airships, they were seeing men in suits on the craft. They were seeing like women in
yes.
dresses, like high society people. They were playing like old timey music and having champagne. And it was like this private club of distinguished men into the arts and science, based out of DC. But when you look more into it, you find that it was predated by another group called NIMSA out of 1850s Germany, of course.
Well, and all this stuff that you're talking about, they're talking about stargates and this
Yeah.
is definitely connected to what you're talking about.
Yeah,
They're
it
talking about
is.
aliens. They're talking about Egypt, aliens, gods of ancient Egypt, and all this stuff. So they are literally saying, so to recap, we have a brilliant doctor and research scientist drafted into the U.S. intelligence network, for which he would continue on and off again relationships until the 70s. Much of his working during this time was about psychic ability, drugs, and all that to help unlock abilities at the same time as channeling entities, both gods of ancient Egypt as well as space aliens. And this sounds crazy. I already know how it sounds, but this is like, this guy is the one that went on to find out more about mushrooms. He literally wrote all the research for, and he called it the sacred mushroom. And so this bizarre whole situation, it's all closely related with the man who is framed for the assassination of JFK. And I'm sorry, like it is weird, weird, weird. This whole thing, like why would all of this and the other names on there, I can't find them right now on that seance of the nine, but they were all super high society people.
Yeah.
And then you go back to what? You go back to what was Joseph Smith doing when we know as a Martinist, twice a year, you can contact and channel things to speak to you on the fall equinox and the spring equinox. And that's what he was doing. That's why he's so renowned to them, because honestly, there's a lot, there's whole Mormon like subsets that aren't mainstream Mormonism. I'm telling you, not the main, okay, that actually say Akhenaten is like one of the biblical people and all this weird stuff, and that Joseph Smith said he was related to Jesus Christ himself, and that they're keeping their bloodlines pure just like the freaking like the Egyptian people back in the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Like why would you?
That's
Yeah,
just like
that's
the
random.
Germania tribe. That's what they were
Yes.
doing. Yeah.
But then where does that come from, right? They're
Yeah.
channeling. They are channeling a
Yeah.
hundred
Well,
percent.
yeah, it goes back and it almost reminds me of the Oracle of Delphi. It was like this that's from ancient Greece, but I'm starting to see that it has
Oh,
connections
connects.
all
Uh-huh.
over,
Yep.
but like it was like these group of girls is how it started, who these young girls would leave home and they would go and do almost like this monk type of a lifestyle where they lived up in the hills and they became these spiritual sacred orators, and
Mm-hmm.
people would go see them and they become these like witch oracles basically, and you see it in ancient Greece, but you also I'm also seeing evidence of it within the origins of theosophy,
Mm-hmm.
and with this
Yep.
group, these groups that became the Nazis.
Well, because
And
she said that she channeled that. Like
yeah,
Blavatsky freely admits that that's what she
yeah,
did. So,
I think
yeah.
she knew about these ancient oracle traditions that you see in Delphi.
Yes. Yep. I think it's all the same thing, just different like areas or different,
Hmm.
you know, traditions or whatever, whatever. But like even the Native Americans say, yeah, the indigo god comes and gets our women pregnant a couple times a year and blah blah blah. Like all this weird stuff, right? Like why would we have all of these things that connect with people that would never have spoken to one another? People drawing on caves did not talk to the asters. Get out of here. That didn't
Yeah,
happen, you know?
yeah,
So
yeah,
we're looking at all of this going, okay, why is this happening? And what are they doing? And what are they really bringing here? You know?
yeah,
And it's all connected, like you said, because it goes back to Project Stargate. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Like this 110% goes in with so many things. Like my brain almost exploded. Like one day I was like, I got to take a minute. And that's why I don't have notes, because I was just like absorbing it. And then I do the notes after. And I just
yeah,
told my husband, I'm like, it's almost Christmas. I just got to stop this for a minute. Cause like I'm going crazy. And he's like, why are you going crazy? And I'm like, cause this doesn't make any sense. It
Well,
doesn't make sense.
it does when you think that a lot of these people, it's like that. What's that phrase they always say? Like the billionaires don't, they follow the
They
stars, right?
read the stars.
They read the star.
Millionaires study the stock market. Billionaires study the
Yes,
stars.
there you go.
Yes.
And that's what
Yes.
this is. This is, we're talking about these high society, like Howard Hughes. Okay,
Yes.
Hughes is, because he's getting his information from somewhere else, from an older time, I think. Because get this,
Absolutely.
like like what he said in that press club about airships was so bizarre to the normie people that were listening. But
Normie.
if you know about this billionaire ancient technology, well, advanced technology club that was around, you're like, oh, maybe he's referring to this. Oh, maybe he's a part of this. And like, get this, like some researchers think that those guys developed anti-gravity gas using emeralds, and
I'm telling you.
they were getting them from South America, which ties the Germans into it. But by the way, Hughes his knowledge on the mystery airships, all of it goes back to the old Veda texts. They
Yes.
tell you in those texts how to build flying machines called vimanas. It's been stored in the Tibetan libraries for centuries. Like there's an old library in Tibet called the Forbidden City of Lhasa. They've kept records for centuries to the point where it's like I think Hughes was just clued in on it, but I also think today the knowledge has just been lost. But I think young engineers could actually go through some of those Veda texts and build one of
Oh
these
yeah.
today.
I do
It,
too.
they
I do
might need to
too.
figure out how to like safely work with red mercury, but hey, if they've got the right alchemist text paired up with the right Vedic text, I think people could build this stuff. But it goes
Well,
back to this high society group that they have a knowledge that's been hidden from everybody else, right?
this is like the kind of explanation about like this group, right? Imagine this very old money. The DuPont name is obvious, but some of the others are less prominent, like Alice Bouvier or Astor's. Okay, listen, these are the names of the people there. Okay, Henry Jackson, Georgia Jackson, Alice Bouvier, Marcella DuPont, Carl Betts, Vonnie Beck, Arthur Young, Ruth Young. Those are your
Mhm.
connects to what's his name, to the assassin, and then the doctor Andrija Purich. It's like Puharich for anybody that wants to look that up. But guess who was one of the really early members that dropped out? Aldous Huxley.
Oh, of course.
I'm just like,
Doors of Perception.
yes. And
He's
I'm just like,
he was
come
really into
on.
eugenics.
Yes. And I'm just sitting there going, okay, this is almost too good. Like I found this. This is super obscure. Very few people even talk about. We should actually dedicate like a whole thing on what they did on the Seance of the Nine. Like this seance was weird.
This
And the
is wild.
fact, yeah, the fact that Ruth was there that knew Lee Harvey Oswald is just bananas to me. Like, why the hell would this weird seance theosophy bullshit have anything to do with JFK? Right? Like,
Well,
it's
uh,
weird. Yeah.
yeah, it shows you what people in those circles were up to behind, closed doors, literally
Yes.
behind closed doors when you're talking about a seance. And like Huxley, the Huxleys were responsible for ushering in this new sort of Darwinian no sacred, nothing, no God kind of a view of science.
Well, and they are super into these herbs, which what? Like basically they're into like figuring out stuff for MK Ultra. And then they used
Mhm.
it on people. They
Yep.
literally like, come on. I know I'm a conspiracy theorist, but you guys have to understand like that's a lot. You know what I
With the
mean?
Huxleys, with his case in particular, it's very uh two-faced. It's a juxtaposition because here's somebody who's attending a seance who is also responsible for taking the seance out of science.
Yes.
They
Yes.
they pulled all the woo out of science, even if it made sense. Even like all the old alchemists, the founding fathers of science were all alchemists and occultists. They believed in some type of spellcraft, and people like the Huxies came
Well,
along and they
yeah,
pulled
and
all that out.
Crowley even was like a big part of this, and it goes to
Yeah.
Grant later. Like, and I know he is the woo-woo side of it, but that's what they did, right? They split two sides. They put the seancey weirdies and the sciency not weirdies, and then but either way, you've got a following that's doing the same thing, right?
Mhm.
You've got what you want. You can bring it together easily later because these guys know this part of it and these guys know that part of it. So it's not far fetched or hard to bring them together to work together. And he says like the acolyte Kenneth Grant developed his occult system based on a ET god from Sirius. Like
Yeah.
we're not talking about like crazy like this started, and this is why people give me so much pushback about what I think, but also what I have made my own hypothesis in my brain has been written by other people. And one of them was Kenneth Grant.
Yeah. How
And
does
he
he fit into
wrote a
this?
book. He wrote a book about Joseph Smith. Like, honestly,
Yeah.
there's some, or Lavenda did. Lavenda did. And I'm telling you guys, like, that shouldn't be a thing. Like, why would an occultist care about freaking Mormon Joseph Smith? Like, why the hell?
They liked the
Right.
structure of that religion because it was channeled. Because it
Yeah.
was channeled.
Well, because it proves that you can contact. They were like,
Yes.
look, because, and whenever I tell people, like, this is what I think, it's like, okay, you have to understand, like, this is happening and this is happening and this is happening. So at the same time, it must all make sense somehow. Like, when you gather up all the people, like Crowley channeled his book and Grant says he channeled his stuff and Joseph Smith channeled his stuff. They're not talking to nobody.
Right.
I'm sorry, they're
No.
not. And
No,
they
absolutely.
don't want us to put that out there because you're right. They've mainstreamed everyone and they don't want people to believe in woo woo. Why? Because it unlocks everything. Like Hitler and all his stuff, like people want to say he wasn't that bad and he was just sticking up for his country and da 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 da. I'm like, yeah, but he was this huge occultist. Like,
Yeah.
what the hell was he doing? You know, and the
Yep.
people that followed him, you know, you are kind of who you hang with. Look at who he hung with. They weren't good guys. Like, I'm sorry. I listened to some one of my patrons sent me a thing and I listened to it all about how Hitler was kind of the good guy. And look, like maybe he had good ideas, but the
I don't know about that.
company he kept, it must have perverted it somehow if he was trying to be all, you know, good at the beginning. It didn't go well. And
Yeah.
so I'm just like, no, at some point you have to, and he was saying basically that they were trying to keep their race pure from aliens. Like
Oh,
Hitler
well.
said
Well,
this.
but Hitler was racist from the jump, so it's hard to
Sure.
paint him in a. 'Cause, I mean, even when he was in World War One and as a starving artist, he was involved with that occult
His
newsletter that was anti-Semitic, like over the top
because
anti-Semitic.
somebody stole his girlfriend that was his niece, by the way, which is grody.
Yeah.
So and he was Jewish. That was the whole deal, was he was an artist and stole his little niece girlfriend and then he was
Yeah.
upset about it. So I'm like, I get it, but at the same time, like, and maybe he did know aliens were infiltrating. And you know, I've done a lot of stuff on genes and genetics and like, I'm not saying that's not a possibility that he wasn't right about like some things, right? But a broken
Mhm.
clock is right twice a day. So,
Right. Yeah,
like,
exactly.
let's not give him,
I and, you know, and he
props.
was I do think that I've been really hesitant on the Nazi channeling stuff, but I'm starting to see a strong argument
It's
for it because
so,
Hitler
oh,
was writing those poems to Thor and to some other pagan
yes.
gods and stuff like that,
That's
but like
who that's who these people are talking to. These are the gods
that's
that
what
they
I'm
were trying
saying.
to connect to. They're trying to connect. They have them specifically set out. Shu and Tefnut, their children Geb and Nut, their children Osiris, Isis, Set, Nephthys, and sometimes the son of Osiris, Isis, Horus. And then it has like this doctor talking about the CIA in the next freaking sentence. And I'm like, okay, you guys, like, you can say anything you want. Joseph Smith was on mushrooms and high, whatever. Why is everyone's story the same, including John D? Right? Like
It's the
it
same. It's
doesn't. Yeah, it's all
Tesla
the
talked
same.
about channeling.
Yeah.
Napoleon met this red entity in Egypt. Crowley channeled the UFO cipher in Egypt and the Book of the Law and all that. Van Tassel, he was this aerospace guy. He moved out to the Mojave Desert and was channeling from an entity
Yes.
named Ashtar. And like NASA was
Parsons,
created by occultists and
Hubbard.
Nazis.
Yeah, all these people. Like they know something we don't know. And what's the best way to make people not study things, right? Like what's the best way to make people not believe in the devil? To pretend he never
Yeah.
existed, right? Like, so same thing. So they're just not wanting us to open our minds to, like, literally it could be right in front of you. Like, how would Muhammad's story clear across the world be the same as little dorky Joseph Smith in New York? Like, come on. Like, he was channeling too. He was passing out too. Joseph Smith said this kind of stuff. Like, yeah, you know, a fit of darkness would come over him, blah, blah, blah. But they were channeling these things. Like, I've shown it
Mm.
over and over again.
Oh, that's interesting about Muhammad too, because we
Oh,
talked
yeah.
about Petra in that last episode, and I think that Petra was a site where these people worshipped there was a cult of Kos there. There's a god named Kos there. And I think that people were worshiping that. Kos translates into mountain. So there was some sort of god of the mountain. And that's why later in scripture, you say Jesus
Well,
say he's going to build his church on top of this rock in Petra,
mhm.
because it was an ancient site of this worship to this pagan god Kos. But Muhammad was
Yeah.
probably born out of that cult of Kos.
And why did the Mormons say this was the place when they got here, right? We are surrounded by mountains. Like they're
Yeah.
everywhere. And so why would Brigham Young pick an area that's terrible for farming? It's inconsistent all the time. Like it's either too wet or too dry. It goes through like all kinds of weird, like we've had snow clear to the top of the ceiling for years and years. Last 2 years, no snow. So like all this weird stuff, right? Like why would he pick here? And also, why is there almost a full underground city here? Like there is, by the way. Like there's
Oh,
tunnels and tunnels. I did a whole show. This was like my very first show I ever did about tunnels underneath a high school that connect to Planned Parenthood,
is it Salt
the
Lake City?
Masonic Temple. It's everywhere, dude. Like
Yeah, yeah,
Ogden, Salt Lake, everywhere. But the
yeah.
actual Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the current, they use them to usher in their famous people like the prophet. He uses the tunnels and they fully put them on pictures on, like for
Yeah.
people to see. Go Google it. And it will show people going in this little rotunda and going down the tunnel. And so I'm like, look, you
Oh,
guys,
yeah,
this
I've got one
is a
for
big
you.
thing.
We've
Yeah.
got that here in Nashville too, and, like, there's notorious tunnels underneath Vanderbilt University, and guess what's right next to the campus of
A
Vanderbilt?
graveyard.
The only Catholic cathedral, uh, in
Look for
town.
graveyards. Look for graveyards near there as well,
Probably a
because
graveyard too.
every time I've ever researched it, it's like graveyard, university, or school, whatever. And then they'll be like, because the University of Utah, there's East High, then the University of Utah's football field, University of Utah over there, graveyard over there. And it's the spookiest graveyard.
Yeah.
I will go in the summer, you guys, and do a whole show on it because it's creepy.
I'd like to see
And
you out there with a spirit
oh,
box.
yeah, no, not that. No
Actually,
way.
I would warn against that.
Yeah, I'm like,
Because you're
I'll go
actually gonna
out
get
there. Yeah.
results. You're the kind of person who they'll show up for.
Yeah, I'm like, no, not for me. I don't talk to those things because they'll follow me
Yeah.
home.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, because my line is bad enough. As I study
Oh,
all
and
this,
I'll tell people, I was doing a podcast with you once, and you were telling me your Minerva story, and
ugh,
I was doing some editing, and I kept, because as soon as you said the thing followed you home, I think it was a line like that. There was a huge crash in your house
yes,
over there. I
yes,
don't know what
it's so
happened, but
scary. I
yeah.
don't know either because there's things, you know what? I was talking about some weird stuff on one of my last podcasts and all my lights turned off. And then this thing has its own little light. It's usually on and it was on red. And they were like, you look so scary, but it happens to me all the time. And I'm like, this is crazy because like I'm constantly fighting like against things outside the world, but also like in my own world, right? Like and so I'm just really careful with things like that now because I'm
Yeah.
aware. But like when you are a Christian and you have a certain spirit about you, like devil worshipers that have come out, they say they can tell who is like got the light of Christ on them because they'll look different, I guess. Like they'll have like a glow. And I'm telling you guys, like, if you've ever walked in a room and people just hate you, like, or babies and dogs just love you, like, there's a reason, right? They can see what we can't see, like, they can
Yeah.
feel what we don't feel. And so, like, I sometimes, and my son gets it too, he's like, Mom, I just can't go out again today. Like, ugh. And I'm like, no, I get it. Like, I totally get it. And I have to work really hard in my home to make sure my home is like good because like we've read the Bible and been like just reading the Bible one day and my back door opened and then slammed shut. And we all just looked at each
Insane.
other and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what is happening?" And stuff like this happens to me all the time. And
Oh,
I
I heard
just
it. I kept playing that recording back, and, like, you you seemed somewhat unfazed by it, but I could tell it really like, you kinda looked when it happened, but it sounded like a full shelf
like
just
crash to the
crashed.
ground.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it was right at like a key moment in that story about this spirit following you home.
Ugh.
But like back to those tunnels, I gotta throw this in too, because I was just
Yeah.
thinking about it. Like
And
you've
the
got,
portals that the Pope just opened. We might want
well,
to go over that.
that's the thing. That's the thing that they have under Vandy, in probably in one of those tunnels, they have a particle collider down there. Speaking of portals.
Of course they
But
do.
right up the road is the Parthenon. The Greek, they have a replica of a Greek old Parthenon here. They've got a 49-foot statue of Athena there.
Ugh.
There used to be a pyramid next to it. Nobody knows what happened to that. It's just mysteriously is just, but next to the pyramid there was a little building called it's like a temple to Pythes or something.
Mm.
Pythes. I looked the word up, and guess what? It goes back to that Delphi oracle group
Ah,
from
that's
Greek.
so weird.
The main
Like, why
girl was
is it
Pythes.
always connect? Like, it's always, and here in Utah, I'll tell you, they're connected to the one that's over the bees. I can't remember who it is. Like the queen bee from Egypt. The beehive is all over. We're the beehive state. We've got bees all over and random cubes like Saturn cubes
Yeah.
everywhere. Like weirdo,
That's a Muhammad
just
thing too, from
cubes.
Petra, I think.
Yeah, everywhere and for no
Yeah.
reason. Just like this is an
It's like
artistic motif, and you're
Saturnalia.
like, why is this in the middle of just nowhere? You
Yeah.
know?
Do you think that
No.
that goes back to like Saturn worship and all
Yes,
that
a hundred
stuff?
percent,
Yeah.
100. I think they're channeling things here. I think in certain areas, like you said, where you are, where you're seeing weird things, where I am, and it's so easy to fool people because they're like, well, the Catholics hate the Mormons and the Mormons hate the Catholics. Listen, people, it is a one world religion already. You just don't know it yet. You will.
Mhm.
You will when they want you to. But they're all in on this together, the ones that have channeled it. Because why? They'll understand it from that point of view. If they say, yeah, we got our book and we channeled it. Well, so did we. And so did, Crowley. And so did all these other people. It's going to be understood like, okay, they do this a little weirder than us, but also look at, if you ever want to have a weird rabbit hole, you go look at Muhammad, how he received his stuff, his religion, how it aligns with Mormonism, and you'll see something crazy because it's like almost identical.
I
It's
believe
so
that.
close.
I
Yeah.
could see that because I already traced him back to Petra, and what else I traced back to Petra was that cube that we're talking about that all the Muslims march around every year. That was at
Yes.
Petra at one time too. They had a black. It's a little building that's a cube shape, but inside there's like a black asteroid or some sort of
Hmm.
rock.
They
That
know
was at
something.
Petra,
Yeah. They
where
know
this cult of
things.
Kos
And
was.
and then Hitler, we get to Hitler and the freaking he's like bringing over Zeus's stuff
Yeah,
and
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
yeah, like Pergamum. And I'm just like the throne of Pergamum and all that stuff. Like, why would he care? Like, why would you move this giant wall, right? Like, and all these things if it was bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Like, why the hell would he
And
care?
too, like Von Braun's mom was a psychic channeler of some sort as well. I
Oh
think that she
man.
was a part of the resurgence of this oracle group that, it goes back to ancient Greece, but I think it was alive and
So
well with the
weird.
Theosophists and with the pre-Nazi Germany rollout. And I think von Braun's mom was a part of it, but von Braun, so he's brought up in the house of this psychic channeler lady. He goes on to write this book about Mars where he talks about Elon. Elon will be the guy who goes to
I seen
Mars.
that. Oh my gosh, I seen that. I
Yeah.
seen that it's old. It's super old. Way
Yeah, it's an
before
old
Elon
book.
was a thing. Yes, I
Yeah.
seen that and I was reading something.
He wasn't even alive when von
Yeah,
Braun wrote that.
Metal Man he wrote this whole article on it and I was looking it up and I was like, "Holy crap, what is this?" Like and then they were talking more about him. Like a whole bunch of things
Yeah.
about Elon.
It's
And I
weird.
was
It gets
and
weird.
his mom is creepy AF. Elon's
Yeah,
mom,
yeah, yeah. Oh, I
you
know.
guys.
But see, here's the thing. Like I was looking at Hughes and I was looking at this pre-aerospace airship technology secret group,
Yes.
right? And I'm thinking now from the 1800s, but like
Yes.
I'm thinking like, what if this Musk Bezos space race, what they're attempting to do today is what these wealthy guys were trying to do over 100 years ago. And this is just a new type of a resurgence of that, because I know that some people think space is fake, but like there is a club of these rich guys that want to privatize space. That's
Mm-hmm.
what this new charter of billionaire aerospace is all about. And it's like,
And that weird Lucifer, okay, the Lucifer telescope, all the stuff
yeah,
about space. Howard Hughes was fifth cousins to the Wright brothers. The first airplane that we have, Howard Hughes, is the fifth cousin to the Wright brothers. They got this information from somewhere. Like you're saying,
yeah.
I think that they did the best they could back then with it, and they made what they could with what they had, right? But
Mm-hmm.
now we have so much more, right? And so of
Mm-hmm.
course they're going to be able, it's like a recipe. Like they were making scrambled eggs and now we're making quiche, okay? Like it's the same. They might have had the
Yeah.
prototype, but they might not have been able to do it. But then you
There
bring
was,
Roswell into it and it makes you wonder, like, and he
well,
was obsessed. Hughes was obsessed with the
Roswell?
radiation committee. He hired
Oh,
Meyer. He hired this guy named Meyer, Meier, not a Y, to actually find out what was being blown up over, and it's like the committee over radiation, blah 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 blah, over there where the bombs were being tested, all this stuff was being tested, because he knew it was not good. And he hired this guy to do an independent research of it, and they ruined that guy's life. They put him in prison for murder for a minute, like he didn't do it, and the guy had to flee to Canada, and they went after him, and he was in the CIA and FBI, whatever, and it all goes back again to the CIA, and they ruined him. They ruined
mm-hmm.
him. He's actually still alive. He wrote an amazing book, and I wanted to say the book because it was great. And I'm just like, I'm doing a whole nother show. That's why I've been like looking through all this stuff, because I'm like, this needs to be talked about.
Yeah, it's going to be a good show. But you also have this guy too that came to mind. I don't remember his name, but he was building observatories and like telescopes for the Rockefellers.
Yes,
And he
yes.
said that he was working with elves that were coming to him at night and helping him do this. And it's like, again, it's like I say, it's like, I know people say space is fake, but like, these people don't think that it is, and they clearly want to go up there and do so. And it just came out recently that they're saying that there's a planet called 55 Cancri that's a giant diamond, right?
Hmm.
That's what I think a lot of this is about, not human process or like the progression of humans. I think it's about like the frontier of like Excel wealth for these people. I think NASA and all the rest just want to tap space or whatever you want to call it for
You
profit.
you need to read this or listen to it on Audible if you have it. This is called Age of Secrets. And this, I'm going to read the little summary for people because this was crazy. Nonfiction, and it's all about international political thriller exposing the real reason for Watergate, the hidden death of Howard Hughes, the illicit activities of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, and their worldwide pursuit of John Meyer, Meier, who tried to expose it. This includes revealing information on JFK, RFK, and critical comments by the New York Times best-selling author Jim Hogan. And so you
Hmm.
guys, I'm telling you, the hearings and all the things that happened, this guy was there. Like he was critically involved in all of it, and they ruined his life. Like ruined his life. And I begged him to come on. He's super older now, and maybe he will, but we'll see. We'll see if I can work some charm because
What
I would love to have him on. Yeah.
what if Hughes was like uh faking some of that crazy? Like what if he had like tunnels in the basement of that hotel and he was
I
sneaking out?
think there were multiple Hues because
Okay.
there was height discrepancies with multiple people that
That's what I'm
met
talking
him.
about.
Yes, they said, "Oh, he's 6'1". No, he's 6'5". 6'5" is a tall mofo. You're not going
Hmm.
to mix that up with no 6 foot tall guy. Like, come on, that's not going to happen. My daughter's boyfriend is 6'5". when he comes in a room, he's not 6 feet tall. You know, it's a very noticeable difference. They were talking about that, and they also talked about him getting out alive. I don't know about that. Not in this book, but like other things, right? I don't know about that whole theory, but I will say I definitely believe he had doubles or triples or whatever, just like everybody does. I definitely think he ended up knowing too much. And I truly believe the Mormon Mafia was drugging him because of all the needles broken off in his
Yeah.
autopsy. And he was, would not do that. Maybe one. I will give you one because maybe he screwed it up once, but those needles back then, you're not going to make that mistake
Right.
twice. There's just no
No,
way.
that was somebody jabbing him and trying to kill him
Yes.
or
Or sedate him,
sedate him.
right?
Yeah. Or sedate
And
him.
when you look at what happens to these people as it trickles down, right? Through gay, especially gay. This guy ends up over, the Howard Hughes Medical Center, and he actually said that, the Mormon will was a fake because he had more power and control with the way it was. It may have been real or not, but I can tell you this, like it's interesting that he would go against his own church and say, "Oh, that's a fake," because he liked his position where he was, and he kept that position until he died. And his family is extremely wealthy from this. So I'm just saying, like, and now his kids are like in TV shows and weird stuff. Like, that doesn't just happen. This is
Hmm.
nepotism all the way around. And, that's fine, whatever. But I'm just saying it's so interesting to me that the church always connects to like theos. It should not connect to occult things. That's for sure. Because they have fledged that off, right? They're like, we are mainstream normal people now that just own companies and da 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 da. Well, yeah, their companies that they're involved with are very interesting, right? Like Microsoft and
Yep.
Alphabet and Nvidia and all these things. This church knows things. And one of the things that really pissed Howard off was that Gay started another company under Howard Hughes Tools, and they said, that's just the Mormons using it for their genealogy. You shut it down. And he pissed off some people doing that. But I'll tell you what, why on earth would he not even know that they started a company in his name? Right. And then he comes to it enough to say, shut it down. And so Mayhew, Robert Mayhew, and then right, Robert? Yeah. Mayhew and then Gay were always battling for like position, and all Gay was originally was an errand boy. So you
Mm.
tell me how he got. So I'm a philanthropy specialist over the hospital now. Crazy. And
Yeah.
they do a bunch of genetic studies on CRISPR. They give out stuff for
Today,
this
right? The
today.
Mormon. Yeah. What's
Yeah.
with the Mormon genealogy stuff? Why is it
They're
so?
crazy, bro. I think it's way more. I think there is a bloodline. They say that they are related to Jesus Christ himself. And I don't know if they're looking for that or something else like
Does that fit
alien
into
DNA.
that book, that Holy Bloodline, Holy Grail book for them?
Yes. And to buy that book costs $200. Just so
Dan
people know.
Brown, the Dan
It's
Brown stuff.
no, this one is called
Oh wait, he
it's a
was
it's
something
a
else.
specific whole. Let me look at
Oh,
it really quick.
yeah. Dan Brown did the National Treasure thing.
This
No,
this
he
is a
didn't.
random one that actually is just about Mormons, but it sounds almost the same. So it's called Holy Bloodline, Mormon something. And also there's another one. So it's called, let's see, Dynasty of the Holy Grail, Mormonism's Sacred Bloodline by Vern G. Swanson. And then there's another book that I cannot get. So if you guys have this book and feel like donating to me to get this book because it's crazy expensive. There's another book called Howard Hughes and His Mormon Family, and I cannot get my hands on it, and I have tried. So it's on Amazon, but you can't get it, and it's just there, but you can't get it. So
That's probably being hidden, I would
yeah,
imagine. Somebody
yeah,
doesn't want
I
that
think
book out.
so. Yep. And I'm telling you guys, like, it's very interesting. All of these books that are like super expensive, almost made to the point where you can't get a hold of them. there's a reason. There's a
Hmm.
reason for that. So, yeah. And I think it connects. Like, you know, back in the day when Hitler was doing his stuff with the Mormons, they were very racist at that point. So obviously they would be like, oh, he's okay. You know, like I don't think they had any problems with the stuff that he was doing. I don't. They had a one drop rule on darker skinned people. And so, yeah,
Well,
it
that I
didn't.
mean, it ties in with the aerospace. I mean, with Hughes and aerospace and Nazis as well. I mean, maybe I've
Mhm.
talked about this before, but well, first of all, the aerospace companies are very powerful. Hughes, I think you said something about how he was maybe putting Nixon in, but even to
Yeah.
this day, the aerospace companies put people in office as well, especially in these regions that benefit them. And you'll see this around these top secret Wright Patterson type bases where the local representatives are bought and paid for by these
Yes.
companies. But there's a very particular region in Alabama, and
Yes.
I think I've
Yes.
talked about this, but a the Nazis, a lot of them came over here to Huntsville, Alabama, and it's like a
Yes.
few hours from me. And I used to jokingly call it Little Berlin because there's all these old German couples running around everywhere, but it's like it's an aerospace, NASA, military industrial complex hub. You have all the major companies there, but also recently, I don't know if you saw this, but this is where Huntsville is where this Chinese lady named Ning Li she was working on she disappeared. She was
Oh.
working on anti-gravity. And it's not a rumor. She was working with the government openly on anti-gravity. She was seen at
Mhm.
conferences with US military officials and the DoD, like it was an open thing. Then she started getting these contracts where with these NDAs, she couldn't talk about it. So she kind of
Oh.
disappeared from the public. People thought that she went back to China, so they started looking into it. It turns out she was in Huntsville. Then she got ran over by a car,
Oh boy.
and her husband was with her, and he quote unquote died of a heart attack on the scene. So I'm just telling people this is shady business, and it goes
Well,
deep.
and every astronaut that's ever been in space is either a Mason or a Mormon, and there's a lot of
Oh, I
Mormons
didn't know that.
and also the whole space shuttle Challenger accident. The problem that happened with that actually happened, and there's a huge lawsuit over it with a company that made those bearings here in Utah called Thiokol, and they were the problem, and they were the ones manufacturing that and actually deemed responsible for that problem. So I just find it interesting that their names all over everything too, just like you're saying, all over NASA, all over the CIA, all over these things. Why? Right? Like, what is going on there? Like, this is a religious entity that shouldn't really be involved in like the CIA business or,
Mhm.
all this other stuff. But you have to remember we get into Rotary Club, we get into Freemasons. There's a brotherhood beyond the brother sister on the surface. And people have a hard time with that because they don't want to believe that their, government or religion or whatever they believe in can be nefarious. They are. They are.
Yeah. I mean, I think it has implications for the world we're living in today. I mean,
Absolutely.
I think this aerospace thing has ripples in this disclosure movement and everything else. Anything UFO related. I think that they're
Yes.
involved with it. And it makes me wonder, since there was this I do think that there was this group of these paperclip Nazis that infiltrated the aerospace business in the 40s for sure.
Yes.
So it makes you wonder how much power they still have, how much influence do they still have, and do they represent like this Nazi international group? Because even you look at Klaus Schwab, he's the World Economic Forum guy, right? He comes straight out of a Nazi family. These guys are
Yes.
there right beyond the perception of the public, but they're there.
Yep. Well, and fun fact, like why is it that all of these things are either to further with NASA, to further with telescopes, to further with all kinds of weird things, but also
Antarctica.
right, also fun fact, Philo Farnsworth from Beaver, Utah was an American inventor who developed the first all electronic TV. So you guys tell me, where are they getting all of this like information to create things like this, right? There is a reason why all of this stuff that obviously is going to be used for what? Television programming.
Programming,
Program
propaganda,
us. Yeah. And
propaganda.
so like without these kind of things, I mean, where would we be? And who's over the airways? I mean, I learned this long ago. It's the devil. It's not Jesus that's over the airways. That's why a lot of times we'll have problems when we're doing stuff like this because we're trying to fight against things that they don't like it, you
Yeah.
know? So I'm just saying, like, this kind of stuff is imparted to people. I truly believe with NASA technology, with Hitler, with all of these things, with television programming, all these weird things that shouldn't connect, they do simply because that is what they need out there to make this go forward. Just like Howard Hughes is the cousin to the Wright brothers. Like, how the hell is that? That's so weird. Like, it's all connected. And it
Oh, I didn't
shouldn't
know
be.
that.
Yeah, he's the fifth cousin to the Wright brothers.
Well, that ties into this airship mystery too,
Yes.
big
Yes.
time, because the Wright brothers, the more you look into the airship mystery, the more it looks like the Wright brothers was just a something they staged for the public to keep
Right.
a lot of this other technology out of, I don't know, just out of view for some reason.
Right.
And I'm
Well,
not saying, I
because
think they
they can't
flew.
say an alien told me. Like,
Yeah,
that's
well,
not
that
gonna
too.
work.
But I think that
Yeah.
I mean, I do think that the Wright brothers flew a plane at Kitty Hawk. I'm not doubting that. I'm saying there were other people who were flying before that, not necessarily in a plane, but in these mystery airships that had this other strange form of propulsion where it sounds like they were pulverizing emeralds or using red mercury to create like a anti-gravity gas to go up in the air with. And but Hughes knew about it because he's alluding to it at this press club thing. So it's like, and he's related to the Wright brothers. Like, what is going on?
Yes. Yep. And they all have common, like it's just too easy. Like they all have common connects, right? Like it makes no sense, but then it makes sense that way. Like you said, oh, that makes complete sense. Because this information was probably imparted on their family, channeled somehow, whatever, however they got it, right? And what happens with Howard Hughes and his money, right? There's a sacrifice because both his parents died, bam, bam, like right before he got his money. That's how he got his money so young. His
Oh,
parents died.
like a Lady
So,
Gaga thing.
yep. And I'm telling you guys, like I know it sounds crazy. I know. It's much easier just to say nothing's connected and that can't be true, but then why does everything seem so weird? You know?
Yeah.
Like I don't
Well,
know.
it seems pretty obvious that some of these pop singers have just straight up almost admitted to channeling and doing manifestations to
Yeah.
grow their career.
Yeah.
I mean, even like people like Ariana Grande, like she has these lyrics in one of her songs where she's talking about like I make things happen because I'm magic and I use magic and I will my career into an existence. Like the
Yeah.
Kardashians do it, like Jay-Z and Beyonce, they all do it. They all pretty much, if you look really deep, they admit to using some form of magic to get to where they're at. Katy Perry, they all do it.
Well, and speaking of music and recording, Alman H. Clegg is the pioneer of digital audio, instrumental in development of digital recording and the audio disc, which led to the compact disc revolution. And he was a Mormon. So all of these things, like maybe there are certain societies that are guardians over this stuff, right? And they're
Yeah.
they're slowly releasing it as it fits their need, right? Like you
Well,
said.
that's what some people have theorized about Roswell, is that that was this other side of these beings from the other side, that they were kind of helping us, giving us a little helping hand with this technology. If you look into the research of Linda Moulton Howe, for instance, she went back and traced the circuitry and fiber optics back to the Roswell crash, because right after the crash in 1947, all this advanced technology starts coming out of Bell Labs. and she did all this research tracing it back basically to Roswell. Now,
Mm,
what is that? What do you do with that? That means that the technology that was going to help us build an internet and be able to construct
right.
computers, that means that may have come from off world.
Well, the one guy said the supercomputer, he developed it because he had to dig underneath his house,
Yeah,
right?
Seymour
And talk
Cray.
to like gnomes or whatever. And
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, so if that happened and it has to deal with digging, right? Like what was Joseph Smith doing when he got the Book of Mormon plates? He was
Was he
digging.
digging?
He
Yeah.
was digging.
And you
And
know what's
and what about Elon Musk and Jared Birchall? Elon Musk and Jared Birchall met. That's his number one guy now that's over his money. Jared Birchall, who is not, he does not have the schooling or authority to be over that, but he is. And guess where they met? They met at the Boring
boring?
Company digging tunnels. What the hell's going on with digging? Right?
Yeah,
It's the
it's
air, it's the air or the ground. It's like either one.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
It's funny with that Seymour Cray story. It's like he said he was building the supercomputer, but every time he'd hit like a roadblock or hit a problem and he didn't know where to go or what the solution was, he would go down and he would start digging. And in his dreams, these elves would give him the answer, but he had to
So weird.
dig.
But like maybe that's just how it shows up for him because he's okay with that. Like Crowley, it could be a spooky thing because he wouldn't be scared. And like Joseph Smith, it would be an angel because, he's doing
Hmm.
churchy stuff. And then so for other people, maybe that's what that guy would be comfortable with, right? With these.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't really want to see a gray pop up on you. I don't think that anybody gets a warm feeling for that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
And who
Yeah.
even knows anymore, like if those are just aliens from
They're
outer space?
demons. I
Yeah,
think they're
there's
demons.
there might be some trickery going on there where
Yeah.
something's taken the form of an alien. I think in some of those cases, but this kind of a lot of my research keeps leading back to Antarctica as well, and we know there's a lot of weird stuff going on down
Oh
there.
yeah.
I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
what I found was I'm sure you're familiar with this. Buzz Aldrin went down there. I think it was 2017. He had to be air vac'd out. Uh, he's a NASA guy. He's a space guy or whatever. So what was he doing down there in the first place? But he tweeted pure evil as
Oh.
he's as he's being as he's being air vac'd out of Antarctica. So it's fueled all this conspiracy theory about what that was all about. But something's going on down there at Antarctica, and it ties
Hmm.
in with all this JFK aerospace NASA stuff too, because it all has ties down there. The guy,
Well, and what did JFK say that we were fighting against? Do you remember in his speech? We fight not against what?
oh, tell me, I
Remember
forgot.
this? And we fight against
Oh,
principalities.
really? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, let me find the quote. He talks specifically about this. I think he was saying the part out loud that he wasn't
Oh.
supposed to say. And
Oh,
I
well,
think
you know what? The guy that wrote some of his speeches was a guy who was part of Bird's crew
oh,
on the Antarctica stuff. The guy that JFK was going to meet after the parade, like the parade where they killed him, he was on
uh-oh.
his way in that parade to talk to a guy who had been to Antarctica with Byrd. His name was Berkner.
Oh.
So Berkner had
Well,
all this stuff on Antarctica that's still classified under high jump. And
hmm.
Berkner was instructing JFK on what to do about space and space race, and he wrote lines in some of his speeches, like the one where it says, "We go not because it's easy, but it's because it's the hard thing to do." Berkner was behind a lot of this.
He definitely talked about this. I'm trying to find the exact. It's pretty famous, but I don't want to misquote him, but he definitely spoke about this saying we fight not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. And
Yeah,
and he's
he may have
talking
been
about
quoting the
Mhm.
Bible
He
for that
was,
one.
but
Yeah,
I think he was trying to say something, right? Like
yeah, sure.
encoded, like, remember this. Remember, we have to fight against things we can't see. So I think that, they got nervous because he was going off script. I think
Mhm.
he freaked him out, man. You
Yeah.
know, like, I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, he definitely seemed to go off script, JFK did. He seemed to go he wanted to do his own thing, and if he knew, like, a certain branch of the government wasn't going to go along with it, he just went over their heads. He didn't ask
Mhm.
permission.
Yep.
I
And
do
well,
wonder how things would have been if he had been a president. I really do. I think he may have actually brought some good in to the country,
yeah,
possibly.
I find it very interesting the dark magic I believe that followed his family line to have
Yeah.
every male in that family through his specific line die. That's a lot, man. That's like a lot. His son dies, he dies, his brother dies, like all these people are dying. I mean, John doesn't have a line anymore. I mean,
Was
yeah,
it
brothers, but not his line.
I'm not a big like pro Kennedy guy. Like I don't know if things would have been better. I do wonder if they would have been better. But do you
Yeah.
think it was this curse had something to do with I don't know, like they were going to do good things?
I think that possibly it was a big enough threat that the dark occultic stuff that goes on behind the scenes, if they were putting that onto people, like doing seances, doing weird things. Obviously, these rich people were involved in this stuff because we've got proof of
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
So what if they were doing that kind of stuff, like, okay, if this guy is going to do this, or if they do this, then that, right? Like, because I always feel like there has to be a choice, not just like we're going to wish them dead and Avada Kedavra, whatever the guy says in Harry Potter, right? Like, I don't think it works like that, but I think that if there's certain things that threaten those principalities, like, then maybe that's when it happens, right? Because his son died, his brother died, like all these people are dying. And I just think it's interesting. And I think it's very interesting, even though everybody just loves RFK now. I think it's super interesting that he's on Trump's card, knowing Roy Cohn was on the board of Permindex, who had his uncle killed. I'm sorry, that doesn't scream warm fuzzy to me. That's weird.
This
So maybe,
Trump
yeah.
thing is going to be very interesting because he's got ties with there's a Elon
And
Musk.
Judaism, he converted to Jewish. And I
Who,
think it
Trump
was,
did?
yeah, I
Yeah, I
think it
keep
was in,
seeing like the picture or like a footage reel of that. Was that real or was he just there showing
I
respects?
I think I'm going to have to dig into it. We'll say
That's interesting.
allegedly.
Yeah, yeah,
We'll
yeah.
say allegedly. But I do know this. He is trying to prove that he has like a stake in the game, that he's from like a certain tribe so that he can actually be, through David's line and da 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 da. And I know he's not. That's not
Mm.
he's very white. He's very white and delightsome, right? His child
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
extra. His kid's a Nephilim. His kid's like 6'7". Did you know that?
No, I
His
didn't
kid
know.
is gigantic. And I'm just like, this is crazy to me, that like all this stuff. And I just think that everything is a psyop when it comes to control and power. There's no billionaire, trillionaire, millionaire that loves us enough to save the world. Get out of here with that. They're on board, they're on the payroll. Depending on how active they are, I don't know. And somebody put it to me this way, and I think this is the best way to explain it. They all go to the same things. They all are on WEF. They're all on this stuff. And Biden and that, like, Kamala whole situation, they just want to be there in the club, right? But
Yep.
they don't want to run it. Where Trump, he wants to run that bitch. And I think he's going to. And so it doesn't mean that he's better than anybody else. It just means that he's better in that way because he takes charge, and that's what he's going to do. But
Have
he's
you
been nefarious. I,
noticed
I don't
he's
know.
yeah, yeah, have you noticed how he has changed lately? Because he used to be this, automatic tweeter, and he was ticking everybody off. He was pushing all the hot buttons and just and getting under people's skins and almost like trolling the country sometimes.
Right.
He that's gone. I think he's realized like if I'm going to make it this time or obviously he won, but before he won, I think he thought to win, I have got to go about this a different way. He's
I
totally
think
changed.
I think this is what I truly
Outwardly, right? That's what I'm saying.
truly, I believe he's part of the great deception that ushers in the Antichrist. I don't think he himself is the Antichrist, in my opinion, although there's been a pretty good case made for it that he is. But I will say this is he is obviously going to be part of a great deception. So things will get better under him because you can't control a people that don't want you, right? So before, I think it was actually planned that he was going to lose the last time because they didn't really want him back yet, right? But now people like in my family that hated him because of his mean tweets, because of Grabber and the you know what, and all the things, right? Back in the
Yeah.
day. So they're like, we can't have this. My husband's family was like, oh, he's scum. He's this, he's that. And I'm like, okay, I mean, I get it. He's still better than the other alternative. But here's the thing, now they want him. Now they're
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, we just Trump, yay, and blah, blah, blah. And who is it that wants him? Christians. And what is he doing? Making Bibles and doing weird stuff like that. He's selling his own version of a Bible.
He knows his audience.
He knows
He
his
knows his
audience.
audience.
And this guy, this is the same guy, don't forget, you guys, that had a hotel called the Atlantis. He's not dumb. Like,
Yeah,
let's
yeah,
get
yeah.
real. He knows some stuff. He
No,
also
he's
sent the Ark of the Covenant, a complete replica, to over there, like barely. I can't remember when. I think it was like a couple months ago, but he sent it over to Israel just barely.
my advice to people would be don't let your guard down just because Trump's in.
Yeah. I mean, no,
Whatever you do.
listen, we should have been warned enough when this happened with Jesus. And what did they say? They didn't want him released. Why? They wanted a king, not a savior. Don't make a man your savior that is not your savior. You do not look to him for your answers. We look to Christ. And if
Mhm.
we take our focus off of Christ and look to a man, we're going to not it's not going to work out good for us in the end because you're going to be held responsible for that. And I truly believe that. You cannot do that with anyone. I don't care if it's Trump or anybody else. I don't care if it's your favorite musician. Look, come on,
As long as they don't start taking my rights away and making moves towards a police state or a
Right.
surveillance state or any of that stuff, as long as they don't start doing George W. Bush Patriot Act type stuff or these big psyop event. Hopefully, we don't have another
Yeah.
big psyop event while he's in. Hopefully, everything's
Oh,
cool. Hopefully, he really is going to be anti-war. Hopefully, Elon Musk really is going to start cutting all these excess government tentacles. Like our government's way too big, they're way too involved in our
mhm.
lives. And but I am concerned, and I don't think people should put their guards down. Like I say, like this
No.
whole drone thing, and like I'm not going to get into all that
Did
because
you see the
but
thing about Elon said about the drones before they happened? Like months ago, he was like talking
well,
about
there's
drones.
that Cliff High prediction that's involved
Mm-hmm.
that involves Trump and that
Yep.
Rogan interview and stuff.
Yep.
And I think people just need to be real careful about this drone thing too. We don't want them to be the only people regulating the skies. That they're going to
Right.
put if we let the government regulate because of this, before we know it, they're going to be the only people in the skies with the drones. And then you're going to be
Right.
looking at a big brother 1984 police state with
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
don't want that kind of stuff happening. That's all I'm saying is like people put your guard up for that kind of a thing. Don't let them use it
Absolutely.
for more power. But I know
And
before
don't
we
get deceived with Project Bluebeam crap because it's
yeah,
crap.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You're never at this stage, you're not going to know if they're real aliens. Guys, I'm sorry. I
Right.
hate to
Right.
say that because I know it's going to be confusing,
But how
but
would we know? Yeah.
but
Like,
if
come
something
on.
happens, you don't know if it's a psyop or if it's a holograph or a hologram, I mean, or if it's something real. We're not going to know. So we're going to have to be on our guard about this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yep. We need to put our faith and trust in the one thing that we need to refocus that. Like I'm not saying that I don't love paying extra for groceries and all the things that are happening in our lives
Sure.
right now. But also like he's not your savior. If he goes in and does the best thing ever and that's great. Perfect that. But he's not your savior. So,
Yeah.
focus your heart to Christ. That's the only one that won't lead you astray, because the rest are men, and we're all fallible. And I mean men, like men and women, not just men.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, other than that, this has been great and
This has
interesting.
been great.
I think this is yeah, we should do another deep one on permindex and stuff, because I'll tell you, it is shocking. Listen to that book, and you'll be like, holy crap, there's one
Age of
other.
Secrets.
Age of Secrets. Yes,
Okay.
that one. And there's one other that I'm going through right now. But, Sandra Tanner actually wrote a book, a little tiny book called Mormon Spies, Hughes, and the CIA. And she's an ex-Mormon. So this stuff has been out.
Mm-hmm.
This stuff has
Mm-hmm.
been out there for a while. And I just think that it's been forgotten, but the playbook hasn't, right? So I truly say, look, Howard Hughes was a useful billionaire. Is Trump? I don't know. I don't know that answer.
So let me ask you this though, does the 9, does that fit into the Age of Secrets?
The 9 was totally separate.
Okay,
And,
okay.
and
That's what I
but you'll
thought.
see the connection through Ruth and her husband. So on the Seance of 9, Ruth and her husband were there, and that happened in 1953. And we could do a big thing on that. And
Mm-hmm.
it's very interesting. I'm telling you guys, like, why would it even be connected? But yet here we are. You
That it
know.
was, well, you know what? I'll tell you, it was happening over here in Nashville as well. They called it the spiritualist movement here, but there were these little pockets of people in early 1900s, maybe I think even in the 40s and the 50s, like you're saying, this was going. There were these little pockets of people who were getting together and having these seances, and it was a big, well, it wasn't a big, but it was a small movement that was happening here in Nashville. And
With
if
the upper echelon. Yes.
there was a
Yep.
and there was, yes, it was, they were high society. And one of the guys who was having the seances at his house, who kind of became like one of the big figures of that channeling scene here in Nashville, there's a road right up this behind my house
Hmm.
that is named after him for some, and I've been trying to figure out what that's about because it's a really
Hmm.
weird road, right? So this stuff was
Weird.
happening all over, you know.
Yeah, I think if we focus on like maybe one on the political end, like permandex and all that stuff, and one on like the woo-woo end, I think we might find the connect. I think so. Because too
Two, you
much, yeah.
two separate.
I think so. I
Okay,
think we might
okay.
have to. We can try to
Yeah.
fit it in one, but it might be long. But
No,
I
that's
mean,
cool.
that's okay with me either way.
Yeah. 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 We'll talk more about it afterwards. That sounds great.
Yeah, yeah. And so for that, you guys, hopefully we've got you interested enough. This is history, and history does unfortunately repeat itself. We have to be wise as a serpent and gentle as a dove, and we have to at least have the knowledge to understand these things. And that is one thing that I truly believe that the churches have used against people to do not look at the occult. Don't research this and that. Don't look into these woo woo things. Oh, scary, scary stuff, because they don't want you informed. Because look at where it leads, right? To the government. Like,
Yeah.
that's weird. Yeah. So
I
keep your
agree with
eyes
that
open.
100%.
Yep. Any other words of wisdom for our audience today?
No, no, I think I let it out with that whole "don't let your guard down"
So
because
good.
I truly do believe that. I just put out. People were emailing me and they asked me to do a drone episode, so I did one, and that was the main takeaway for me. Is like I don't know what those are. My suspicions is that it's a rogue aerospace thing with
Right.
military ties and all that stuff. That's just speculation. That's just I'm putting that idea on the table. But the main thing that I'm concerned about is this technology jumping on us faster than we're ready for it, which it is. AI and all this in the surveillance state, it's already upon
Yes.
us. And I think that I'm going to try to do a better job on my end on my show of telling people, hey, get a copy of 1984. I know it's not the Bible. I don't put it above the
Yep.
Bible, but I think
Yep.
every American should have a copy of that and should be ready to fight that sort of thing as it comes our way. That's all I got.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And let people know one more time where to find you.
I'm Tim Constantine. My show is called the Sixth Sensory Podcast. It's spelled SIX. I'm on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and Patreon. Sixth Sensory Podcast.
And if you're watching me on Tim's show, I'm Heidi Luv of the Unfiltered Rise. I'm everywhere podcasts are served. I do have my own website, unfilteredrisepodcast.com, and Patreon, which will get you extra episodes and lots more silliness for me because I'm worse on there.
And if you guys want to
But
hear
that's
more
okay.
about if you guys want to hear more about Howard Hughes, Heidi did an excellent deep dive on that, and it's in an episode she put out called Mormon Mafia, I believe. So check that out.
Yes, Mormon Mafia. And we will be continuing these deep dives with that because it is just fascinating to me. I can't get off of it. So sounds like Tim has been clued in on the same stuff. And I don't know, we just align almost all the time. So that's kind of funny that we were studying the same stuff. So with that, we appreciate you all. You guys keep your head in the game. Don't be fooled by fake aliens and all the other stuff. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
See you next time. Bye.